Be it known that a public hearing is held by the Board of Adjustment of the City of Marshfield, Missouri, upon the application of Joyner Enterprises Incorporated for zoning variances for a property addressed as 521 Jackson Street, which is located approximately 300 feet west of South Locust Street, pursuant to Section 420 of the Marshfield Municipal Code. The subject parcel is zoned I-1 Light Industrial District, and the zoning variances are as follows. A reduced rear yard setback of 5 feet rather than the I-1 Light Industrial District required setback of 20 feet. A reduced front yard setback of 20 feet rather than the I-1 Light Industrial District required setback of 40 feet. A reduced lot width of 50 feet rather than the I-1 Light Industrial required minimum of 100 feet. This hearing is now open. Are there any in the audience who would like to speak on this topic? Hearing none, this is closed. Be it known that a public hearing is now held by the Board of Adjustment of the City of Marshfield, Missouri, upon the application of Joseph and Julia Strong for 3 zoning variances on 2 adjacent but separately addressed single-family homes pursuant to Section 420 of the Marshfield Municipal Code. The subject properties and zoning variances are as follows. 423 North Olive Street, located 100 feet south of the southwest corner of North Olive Street and East Bedford Street. The applicants are requesting a rear yard setback of 7 feet rather than the R1 one-family residence requirement of 20 feet. At 432 East Bedford Street, located 150 feet west of the southwest corner of North Olive Street and East Bedford Street, the applicants are requesting a rear yard setback of 8 feet rather than the required 20 feet. At 432 East Bedford Street, located also 150 feet west of the southwest corner of North Olive Street and East Bedford Street, the applicants are requesting a front yard setback of 22 feet rather than the required 25 feet. This hearing is now open. Are there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this hearing? Hearing none, this is closed. Be it known that a public hearing is held by the Board of Adjustment of the City of Marshfield, Missouri, upon the application of Roast Properties LLC for zoning variances for the property addressed as 323 East Washington Street, located on the northwest corner of North Pine and East Washington Streets, pursuant to Section 420 of the Marshfield Municipal Code. The subject parcel is zoned R3, Multiple Family Residence District, and the requested zoning variances are as follows. A reduced rear yard setback of 5 feet rather than the required 20 feet, a reduced front yard setback of 8 feet rather than the required 25 feet, and a reduced overall lot size from the minimum to allow for the construction of a single-family dwelling in an R3 multiple family residence district. The required R3 minimum for a single-family dwelling is 6,000 square feet, and the applicant is requesting a variance to allow a single-family dwelling to be built on 4,500 square foot lot. This hearing is now open. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this topic?
I don't know. My husband's not going to say anything. I don't really know what all this is about. I know it's changing the zoning and the size of the lots and stuff, but we own property on Madison. So I don't know what this means as far as that lot that we own. I don't know.
It does not impact any other lot than this particular lot.
Okay, which one?
For Roast Properties,
I don't know.
it's at the corner of Pine and Washington.
No. Okay.
I think they're looking at, there's a house there right now. If you look at the property, and I think they're wanting to build back a new house, demolish that structure because it's dilapidated, and I think they're wanting to build a new one, but they have to get this approval in order to do so. If not, they're stuck with rehabbing what's there.
Okay.
So that, it's just for that particular
Okay,
parcel that
that
they're,
makes more sense then, because we didn't know, are you gonna
Yeah.
set our yard, the street back into our yard, or,
Yeah.
So
No,
we didn't know what's going on.
if you look at that house, it sits so close to property lines, and this is the only way for them
Yeah.
to put a new structure is to get approval to do so. If not, they'll have to just rehab what they have.
Anyone else like to speak on this item? Okay, hearing is closed. Call to order, Board of Adjustments. Roll call, please.
Eastward Alderman John Flynn.
Here.
Eastward Alderman J.C. Cunningham.
Here.
Mayor Natalie Nish.
Here.
Westward Alderman Robert Boggs.
Here.
Westward Alderman Stacy Lee.
Here. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the application from Joyner Enterprises. Scott, are you going to walk us through this?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that, Mayor McNish. Sam, could you share screen and I will go through our PowerPoint tonight. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see the intro screen here, so I'll move on. So the first of the items this evening is for the Joyner property. And give me just a moment here here we go. So, and this property is located at 521 East Jackson Street. And I have a locator map on the screen here. And just keep in mind that this aerial photo is of the existing entire tract, but the Joyners are proposing to basically divide this lot in half. So it'll really only be the southern half that will be the lot. And I'll show you a rendering of the proposed replat here shortly. But just again, by way of background on this one, as Mayor McNish noted, the property is zoned I-1 light industrial, and this particular tract, if it does get replatted, is very small. It's 0.09 acres or roughly 4,700 square feet, very small. The location is just west of the intersection of South Locust and East Jackson Street. And right now there's a commercial building there with an existing beauty salon. And the city provides all services, including sanitary sewer, water, and fire protection, and utilities are provided by Webster Electric and Show Me Power. And as noted at the meeting outset, there are 3 variances associated with this. The first has to do, and all these have to do with required setbacks in the I-1 light industrial zoning district. So all buildings have to meet certain setbacks and size standards, and the applicant is requesting to deviate from those standards as part of this request tonight, the 3 variances here. So the first is to allow for a reduced property line. The rear yard will be 5 feet along the north property line instead of the required 20 in I-1. The front yard setback, rather than them being the required 40 feet along Jackson Street, it will be 20 feet. And that's actually an existing condition. The building is quite literally 20 feet from the front property line. And then the applicants are requesting, and rather than the required 100 feet wide width of the property, they're asking to go down to 50 feet. So again, continuing by way of background, you can see the zoning map here on the right side of the screen, and the subject tract is here in the middle of these pink lots. To the north, it's zoned residential. On the other side of Madison Street, it's R2, 2-family residential. There's a warehouse structure on the south side of the street, which is zoned I2, heavy industrial. And then surrounding the tract on all sides is I-1 zoned property. And right now, school bus parking operated by the applicant is located on the surrounding tracts. So again, here's a copy of the potential replat that will be, depending on the outcome of this meeting tonight, will be a topic for conversation and consideration by the Board of Aldermen at their regularly scheduled meeting. But as I said, a couple issues for the Board of Adjustment to consider is the size and lot layout, the rear yard setbacks, and the ability to ensure fire safety, and the easements. So again, this is almost a 3,900 square foot tract. If it's replatted, it will be the smallest I-1 zone tract in the city. And then we're pointing here to lot number 2. And it will be among the smallest 1% lots in all of Marshfield in terms of those lots that are developable, when where you can actually put a structure on it. So it's quite small. Despite this, the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended approval of the replat contingent on the Board of Adjustment outcome this evening. In terms of rear yard setbacks, normally we want to have enough room in the back for a fire truck to get through, and a fire lane. In this case, though, staff's opinion is that there's sufficient ability to fight a fire because everything north of proposed lot 2 is paved, and no concern in regard to fire truck access. And then finally, easements. We don't like, from a general standpoint, utility companies don't like it when utilities to serve the lot are on a separate lot, or if structures are built over a utility, that's a no-no. So, but in this case, all utilities are out front, water and sanitary are out front, and there's no issues in regard to that. So, as with all 3 cases tonight, the code, section 420.020, calls out some standards which the Board of Adjustment must take into account as they consider these variances. And these standards are applicable throughout the United States, and they're based not only on United States Supreme Court standards, but also state Supreme standards that have been decided by cases going back, many years, many decades. And so the board will be considering and answering a consistent question every time in their role as the Board of Adjustment. The first of those is whether the condition that's prompting the variance is unique to the property and is not ordinarily found elsewhere in the same zoning district, and whether the condition has been created by an action of the property owner, i.e., is it a self-imposed hardship? Are the applicants needing to ask for this variance because they've decided, where the lot lines are? In this case, this staff views this as a self-imposed hardship because the applicant and property owner, they've determined where that rear property line is going to be for lot 2, and they own the rest of the land around there. And in addition, they've also elected to make the lot not as wide as the I-1 zoning code requires. They've asked for it to be 50 feet instead of 100 feet. So the joiners could avoid the rear yard setback and the lot width setback variances because they own that land. So as a result, using the strict interpretation of the code, staff really doesn't have any option but to other than to alert the Board of Adjustment that this is a self-imposed hardship created by an action of the property owner and their self-imposed hardships. Regarding the front yard setback, as I noted at the outset, the front yard for the lot is already set. The building was built before 1967 when Marshfield adopted its first zoning code, and the building was already closer than the I-1 zoning code requires. So instead of the 40-foot setback, it's at 20 feet. And that's not unusual in many parts of Marshfield, especially close to downtown and surrounding the downtown area. And in this case, the Board of Adjustment recognizes that you can't create more land for these lots. And this is just how Marshfield developed over the past almost 200 years. And as a result, then the Board of Adjustment in the past has not objected to setbacks in regards to existing buildings. So in this case, staff has no concern. The applicants have applied for this setback because if something would happen to the building, either a man-made or natural disaster, the code would require that the new building be built back at the modern day standard of 40 feet. But there's simply not enough lot depth in order to accommodate that. And it's also very expensive to tear up the old foundation and to move that foundation back in order to meet that setback. So again, and you'll hear this later on some other cases tonight, staff generally does not object to and is very, is supportive of setbacks that allow an existing building to come out of a grandfathered or legal non-conforming state. Finally, the other standard for review is whether the granting of the permit of the variance will adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. In this case, the joiners own all the land surrounding Lot 2, and so this is not going to affect the property rights of adjoining property owners or residents. So those are the standards of review that the Board of Adjustment uses. In regards to staff discussion, we understand from the June Planning and Zoning Commission meeting when the Planning and Zoning Commission made a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen about the proposed replat, that in all likelihood, this property is probably going to, at some point in the future, become or will be sold to the Marshfield R1 School District, just like the larger lot, Lot 1, is scheduled to become part of the Marshfield School District in the very near future. And in fact, on June 15th, Mrs. Joyner stated that she believed that the Marshfield School District is the most likely purchaser. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to, we don't have a crystal ball. There's no guarantee that the school district will want or need this lot. And so we're in staff is in a position to try to figure out, what can this 0.09 or 4,900 square foot I-1 zone lot, what can it be if the school district decides that they don't need it, if it's not sold to them? And also we must acknowledge that the rear yard setback and lot width are at the applicant's discretion. And so if the lot doesn't perform, if the school district doesn't purchase the lot and then it doesn't perform, if it remains vacant for many years, this is what we're talking about tonight about, what should we do in regards to this situation? So with that in mind, staff concludes that the first two variances regards to the rear yard setback and the lot width are self-imposed and should therefore be denied. In regards to the front yard setback, again, no concern on this one. The reason we're recommending denial of the first two, however, is we must adhere to those review standards, and we don't want to set an unwanted precedent for future variance requests similar to this one. So again, staff recommendation is a denial of the rear yard setback and the lot width, and we have no objection to the front yard setback. And I'll try my best to answer any questions, and assume the joiners are in the audience as well. So I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Board of Alderman, any questions? Not, I'll open the floor for discussion. Alderman Lee?
I have ruled this for quite some time, and I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not sure what the best answer is. My honest opinion is that Marshfield Schools and Joyner Enterprises should have solved this before it got to us.
Alderman Cunningham?
Well, I kind of agree with Stacy, but I really don't have any other questions.
Okay. Alderman Boggs?
No, I've talked to the joiners a little bit. And my concern would be not making too small of a zone I-1 that in the future, nobody knows what's gonna happen. That's my concern, is setting ourselves up for failure.
Alderman Quinn.
Are there better solutions to the problem than a variance? I think there are. And yeah, and that would be basically all. So,
Okay. At this time, if there is a motion, I'll take a motion for this item. Hearing none, we will move to the second item on our agenda.
Okay. The second set of variances this evening is in regard to property at 432 East Bedford, and also, right next to it, but on a separate street at 423 North Olive Street. And both these properties are owned by Julie and Joseph Strong. These properties are zoned R1 single family residential, and the overall lot size is almost 3/4 of an acre. Again, it's located on the southwest corner of Olive and Bedford, and there's two single family detached dwellings that are located there. The city of Marshfield provides all services other than electricity, which are provided by Webster Electric and Show Me Power. Just like the previous case, there's 3 variances associated with this application, and Mayor McNish read those, but I'll refresh your memory on those. We have a front yard setback for 432 East Bedford, the lot to the north there. They're asking for 22 feet setback instead of 25, and that's an existing condition. For the second variance, they're asking for a reduced rear yard setback for 432 East Bedford. They're asking for 8 feet instead of 20 feet. And then for the lot on, for the home at 423 North Olive, again, they're asking for a rear property line of 7 feet instead of 20 feet. And I have a copy of the proposed plat that's here that you can view on the right side of the screen. The lot line locations for these lots has resulted basically in very limited rear yard areas and limited functionality for these 2 homes, even though the size of the lots is 3/4 of an acre. So to resolve this, the Strongs are asking to replat the property and basically to move lot lines, especially in regard to lot 2. So in so doing, they're not able to meet the 20-foot setback for either of the structures. And I'm going to use my pointer to show, where those distances are very short. This is about 7.2 feet right here from the building foundation to the proposed rear lot line. And similarly for the home that faces Bedford Street, there's roughly 8 feet between a screened in porch, which counts as the building footprint, to the rear property line. This doesn't impact all the rear lot because the home on Bedford Street does have still has a nice rear backyard. It's just this point right here that becomes very close. And on lot 2, the owners or future residents of lot 2, they have a nice side yard here that can function as their rear yard, but still quite tight back here. But they do have this accessory garage, detached garage structure. So in addition to the rear yard setbacks, the home at 432 is legal non-conforming, or it's grandfathered in regards to this 22-foot distance from the property line to the building foundations. So the Strongs would like to rectify the non-conforming situation up front by asking the Board of Adjustment to allow for the 22-foot setback instead of 25. Again, in regard to the surrounding zoning, all properties in all directions are zoned R1 single family residential, and there's single family homes in all directions. And you can see this particular property is located overwhelmingly in an R1 single family residential district.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
For clarification too, what they have in their packet, go to that next one.
Oops.
To the
Right
plat.
here?
Yeah, so this one does vary from what's in your packet. They did not meet originally in their first drawing, they did not meet the density requirements, and they did not meet the 10,000 square feet. But they went back to their surveyor and they redrew that, allowing for an easement there instead of cutting that off. And so now they do meet the 10,000 square foot requirement.
Yeah, and I do want to compliment the applicants in regard to working with staff in order to resolve that particular variance. That that would have been a self-imposed hardship because there's enough land to do it, but the joiners worked with us and they got to 10,000 square feet to meet the minimum R1 lot size here. So we appreciate that. So just a quick overview of some zoning issues, lot and size of the lot and the lot layout. The pending replat, if it's approved, will be comprised of the 10,000 square foot minimum in R1, which is the modern day standard, by the way, and is applicable to lots that are replatted or platted for the first time. In regards to setbacks and the lack of the rear yard, there's just simply there's no other way to draw this line and get to 20 feet. So the Strongs do have a true hardship here. No matter where you put the line, you're coming to the Board of Adjustment and asking for a variance. And so they've essentially split the difference. There's roughly 15 to 20 feet between these two foundations, and they've basically equally split this line so that each side of the line has either 7 or 8 feet. No concerns in regards to easements. Utility lines are all out front, either along Olive or Bedford Street. Again, going back to those standards of review for variances that we talked about in the last case, for 432 Bedford, the front yard setback variance is for the principal structure. If it's approved, this will bring the house out of its legal non-conforming or grandfathered standard. That's very helpful because not only if the house suffers a natural disaster or a tornado or a fire, the new structure can be built at that 22-foot distance. It can't be closer to 22 feet, but a future builder, if something really unfortunate happens, they can reuse the foundation. In addition, this is helpful to this property owner and future property owners because banks look very closely today at legal nonconformities or grandfathered uses, because if something does happen to the structure, they need to know that they can build it back and get their value as the person holding the loan can get value back out of the lot. So it's a very important thing in gaining home ownership today. The homes, again, were set a little bit closer to the front property line. And this home was built prior to 1967 when the original zoning code was adopted by the city of Marshfield. In regard to the rear yard setbacks, I don't think I need to talk too much more about it other than the joiners did, like I said, split the difference. There's no other real way to meet a 20-foot setback for both the homes. Either one makes it and one doesn't, or both of them don't make it. I think the joiners have come up with the best solution. So
It's the Strong, Scott.
oh, I'm sorry, the Strongs. I apologize for using the wrong name. So neither the front or the rear yard variances are the result of a self-imposed hardship. Finally, in regard to the granting of the permit of the variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. Staff's opinion is that it does not affect property owners. There are quite a good number of lots in this part of Marshfield, and you can almost see them by just looking at this zoning map. You can see some of the lots are narrow or smaller than others. And that's the character of this neighborhood. And so we don't have any concerns about adverse effects on adjacent property owners. So in sum, staff has no objection to the 3 variances sought by the applicant. They're all reasonable given the challenges of the lot layout and the overall lot size. And again, be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any initial questions? Open the floor to Alderman Cunningham.
Okay.
Alderman Boggs,
No question.
Alderman Quinn,
Nope, no question.
Alderwoman Lee. Okay. Hearing none with no other comment, I'll entertain a motion.
To approve the request.
Have a motion. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the third item on the agenda is the roast properties LLC request.
Okay. Mayor McNish, members of the Board of Adjustment. At this point, this is for a variance at 323 East Washington Street. The subject tract is zoned R3, multiple family residential, and it is already a very small lot, 4,500 square feet. So again, within that 1% of lots that are, at this very small size. It's located on the northwest corner of North Pine and East Washington Street, and it contains a single family home. Utilities and services are provided by the city of Marshfield other than power, and those are Webster Electric and Show Me Power. Again, 3 variances associated with this one. There's a reduced rear yard setback request to go from the required 20 feet to 5 feet, a request to reduce the front yard from the required 25 to 8 feet, and a request to allow for the minimum lot size in R3. The minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet, and the applicant would like to be granted a variance to go and to potentially construct a new structure on the property, even though it only contains 4,500 square feet. A little background, the existing home on the property is legal non-conforming, just like in the last case. It's grandfathered for its front and rear yard setbacks and its overall lot size. The reason this happened is at some point, this property was subdivided at this size, and subdivisions go through the Board of Alderman. So it was approved probably many decades ago. I don't know the date on this, but I'm just guessing probably the late 1800s or early 1900s is when this lot was created. The home was constructed in the 1940s, according to the assessor's office. So if the home is demolished or it suffers a man-made or natural disaster, any new structure on the lot must comply with the underlying R3 zoning requirements. So the applicant is seeking the first 2 variances to allow for the existing structures to be demoed and a new single-family home to be built on the site. The new building will be closer to the north property line and the south property line than the current R3 zoning code allows. And then the third variance would allow for the construction of a new residential building on the property, even though it does not meet the minimum lot size in R3. The minimum lot size in R3 is 6,000 square feet. A little more background about surrounding uses. You can see the zoning map here, and we're in a pretty colorful part of the city. Over here is downtown Marshfield and the surrounding areas. But the subject tract is here in this R3 zoned area in the lime green color. To the north is a single family home. It's zoned R3. To the south is an office use, which is zoned B2, Central Business District. To the east and to the west are single family homes. One is zoned R1, single family residential, and the other is zoned R3, multiple family residential. And I apologize, I have the wrong map here on the screen, but in regards to size and scale, the subject tract is a small lot. And in short, there's not enough land to meet the standard R3 setbacks. And it's very difficult to build a new structure. It would have to be a very small structure to meet all the setbacks. I'm not even sure they could do it. And it might not meet the building code requirements for a minimum area of a home. In terms of easements, no concerns there. They're either in Washington Street or along North Pine. Again, back to those standards of review for variances. For this property, the front yard and rear yard setback variances are unique in that the majority of the R3 zone lots in Marshfield today they would be large enough to meet the standard setback requirements, but that's not the case for the subject tract. It just simply can't make it. And there's examples of other R3 zone lots that are less than 6,000 square feet, but this 4,500 square foot lot is among the smallest developable lots in Marshfield. My estimate is that 90% of the developable lots in the city are larger than this lot. In regards to the building location and lot size, it's not the result of an action by the existing property owner or applicant. Again, this property was subdivided many years ago. So none of the variances here are the result of a self-imposed hardship. And then in regards to the granting of the permit for the variance, whether it will adversely affect property rights of adjacent owners or residents, the variances will not adversely affect the property rights of those residents. In fact, there's a good chance that a new structure could be built on this property and it may actually benefit those adjoining owners. So staff recommendation, no objections to the 3 variances. We recommend approval of variances, which will enable a single family residential structure to be built on the subject tract in close proximity to the amenities that are offered by downtown Marshfield. And again, I'd be happy to answer any question.
Any questions for Scott?
Is it going to be basically the same footprint?
That's the intent, is to allow the new home to be on the same footprint, and that's what has prompted the variances.
I'll open the floor. Alderman Boggs,
No questions.
Alderman Quinn,
No question.
Alderman Lee,
No question.
Alderman Cunningham. Okay, with no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the variances.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that is the end of our Board of Adjustments agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn Board of Adjustments?
Yes. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And with that, we will call the Board of Aldermen meeting to order. When you're ready, Karen, roll call, please.
Here.
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 Here. And if you would please stand for a moment for a silent prayer or reflection, followed by. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Included in your packet is the minutes from our June 24th meeting. Do we have any questions, corrections, or concerns? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item in your packet is expenditures. There's also a supplemental packet of expenditures. Any questions on expenditure items? If not, I'll take a motion for approval.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, Alderman Quinn and Mr. Lavery were able to attend the Missouri Main Street Association conference about a month back at this point, about a month back. And so we'd like to have an update on kind of what you learned.
So we're able to get the slides. Sam?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I'm sorry. I wasn't in. Sorry about that, Dwayne. Remember what you named that? Remember what you named that when you
No,
sent it to
I'm
me?
trying to remember what it was. There was a number 2 on it. I remember that. So downtown revitalization.
I slid it over. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me,
Yeah, you're lucky you're getting number 2. Number 1 had 48 slides on it. So
Oh,
I'm sorry, I slid it in there.
In a small video, right?
all right.
Sorry.
All right, there we go. Yeah, John came and told me that he brought it up and wanted to give a little quick report. So obviously, there's not going to be any answers tonight. So, but I think it's getting a quick overview of what we experienced when we were there, what we learned about it, and some things that we can bring back. I think are going to be helpful. We did spend 2 days down there, so we probably had 480 PowerPoint slides that we went through. Listening to one of the national representatives of the Main Street America. So you've got Main Street America, and then you've got the Missouri Main Street Connection is the statewide organization, and they're based out of Branson. And so they provide some of the services, some of the communities that are doing it. Right now, there's currently it's down 48. There's 48 Missouri communities that are in the Main Street program, and there's 2 urban main districts, as they're called, which are in St. Louis. Of the 48, almost half of them are all around the Kansas City area, just for a reference. The rest are spread pretty much across the state. We spent 2 days, and what they did, and I'll talk about. I owe Sam an apology because this is from last year. So this is the downtown before it was paved. But I'll work with my drone expert to see if I can fix that next time. So, but go ahead to the next slide, please. They've kind of broke it down to, when you're talking about downtown redevelopment, there's 4 different areas that you want to focus on if you want to really have a good downtown program to either revitalize, develop, redevelop, develop some type of historical district. There's a number of different things that you can do. The first one that they talked about most of is what's the economic aspect of it? What's the vitality of the community, and how is that going to enhance the tax base, the retail trade, some of your bed tax and things like that? And how it's basically going to help your local businesses. The other area is the design, and that has to do not only with the structures that you have downtown, but what are going to be some of the historical preservations that goes along with that. So if you want to have a downtown, what's it going to look like? The third area they talked about is what's the organization. A lot of what we heard is that most of your downtown development are run by downtown business associations. Those are the primary, that's the primary organization. Your businesses come together and create either a nonprofit or some type of organization that generates the downtown. In addition to that, though, it's not just them. There's also the other organizations they talked about, the city and the county and your chamber. Your economic development organizations also have a participation in that, in helping to promote that. And then the fourth area is promotion, and how are you going to promote it? And do you promote it locally? Do you promote it statewide or international? Depending upon the assets that you have in your downtown, that can make a difference with the promotional part of it. So what they presented was basically a four-prong approach to redeveloping your downtown. And those are the 4 drivers that they talked about. Next slide, please. So in looking at, the 5 different sessions that John and I went through, these are the factors that I thought that came out of it. And first off is, what are the drivers that that will promote or push or initiate a community to say, let's do something about our downtown? And the two primary ones is community identity and economic conditions. Okay, I'm going to do economic condition. That one's quite obvious. You got downtown businesses, you got downtown organizations. How can you enhance your downtown to create foot traffic, to create more business downtown for those businesses that you have there, retail trade, expand the tax base. The other one that they talk a lot about, and this is one, and it doesn't have probably the bigger return on investment, though, it's the community identity. There's a lot of communities out there that said, this is our downtown. We want to take care of it. We want to do something. It is a main issue. This is what speaks to our community, and it's our downtown. So that is when they talk about the two drivers, are we going to economically enhance what's going on downtown, and how are we going to promote our community identity? And are we going to use our downtown to do that? Okay, so those are the two factors that generated that. Then they also talked about who are the people, and it comes down to two people. Who are going to be the key individuals and the downtown businesses. And I've already talked about most of these. You have a downtown business association, they come together, they create an organization, and they come up with their strategy. They go out, they look for grants, and they find a way to work with your chambers and your other businesses, your hotels to create more foot traffic as well as tourists that can come in. The key individuals side of that is basically who are going to be your community leaders that are going to help push this, who are going to provide the leadership for keeping the strategy, bringing the strategy together, implementing the strategy, and making it a success. The resources, we had a lot of things. There's a lot of practical tools out there. I have my, they gave us a nice little book. So with a lot of different resources out there that you can tap into, a lot of different funding, grant sources that a community can work, can address to get resources for facades, sidewalks. We've got bump outs, but maybe you want to do some more, attributes on your downtown, signage, wayfinding to get people to get off your interstate, to get to the downtown. A lot of different tools that are in there that you can utilize to enhance your downtown, to create that traffic, as well as resources out there, foundations and different, a lot of different government grants out there that you can apply for to bring in those monies to support your downtown. Partners, they talked, and who are the organizations? I've touched on those already. Your downtown businesses, maybe there's your chamber, same community leadership organizations that we have here. Make sure they're all involved. Make sure they all have a stake in the successful redevelopment of your downtown. And so we went through all of those and how you can bring those together, people together, those organizations together to partner. And then they also talked about the impact. It's like you can talk about your identity, you can talk about your downtown being important, you can talk about your businesses and all, but what's the impact going to be? And how are you going to rate that impact? How are you going to gauge that impact? Is it going to be based upon a simple one-to-one return on investment, or is it going to lean a little bit more towards the community identity? That this community, our downtown, is important to us. It's been important to us for decades and decades, and we want to invest in it and to make it something that people are going to get down to. So what's the impact is going to be from doing a Main Street revitalization versus, because if you got some historical properties and things like that, it's not going to generate a lot of money, okay? But it's going to enhance the downtown. It's going to enhance that appearance. People come in, they see it. This is nice. I'm going to come back. And so it's more those intangibles from the impact. But that was probably the last area that they talked about of bringing of doing a downtown revitalization effort. Okay. Observations that we came across with. First one is, and it's just to remind you, of course, the downtown is part of the community growth plan. And there are some aspects in our community growth plan that we want to address. So some of the things that we did learn down there will lead into some of the downtown projects. One thing I've had a number of conversations is, what is our downtown? And I'm just kind of throwing that open because I've heard different feedback from people. Okay, what do you guys think your geographical boundary of your downtown is? Is it just a square? Is it bigger than that? You know, so some of you people who've been in Marshfield a lot longer than I have may have a good sense of what the downtown is. But if somebody asks me right now, I don't know what it is. And I don't think the community's really gone through a process. But what I'm saying is that if you do go through a downtown revitalization initiative, that's something I think you're going to need to go through about how big is your downtown? What is it going to encompass? How far out it's going to be? Because that's going to affect your strategy. It's going to affect some of the properties that have to do with historical preservation. It's going to have effect on truck traffic or auto traffic. So there's a lot of things that are going to go into that. So, and then you determine exactly, and you don't want it too big either. You know, you don't want it going from the golf course to the interstate because that's going to be too unwieldy. So it's got to be something that you can manage when it comes to putting together your revitalization strategy. So I bring that up. What is the, you know, what's the degree of the community priority at this point? Okay. I mean, my board and grow, I mean, it's about workforce right now. It's about getting product done. It's about getting the utilities done. That's where the priorities are right now. And it makes a lot of sense because it's probably our best opportunity to create more things for our folks here, as well as expand the local economy. Where does downtown fall into this? And so, I mean, well, you know, it's just something I think we need to do that, you know, when we talk with the Grow Board and the MDL Board and the Chamber Board and the city and the county about how high of a priority it is. I'm not saying it's not a priority. I'm not saying it's not important. Nobody's saying that. They all, you know, like we all love our downtown. We just look at what the 4th of July parade was like and that whole event. And so it's there. But how much of a priority and where are we going to put our resources to do a revitalization effort, I think needs to be discussed. And then, of course, like I said, there's multiple downtown resources and grants available. There, and you know, my notebook right there is clearly there. There's actually strategies, and trying to remember what the match was. Was it 20% match to go through the Main Street connection to come in and do a strategy, or was it 15%?
I think it was 20.
Was it 20? Okay, so they will. There's a state grant that you can apply for, that Missouri Main Street Connection Group will come in and they'll actually help you develop a revitalization strategy, but there's a local match that goes to that. But that will lead us into what's the best way to address those other multiple resources. And then the last thing.
Did they get into who applies for those grants, whether it's the city or whether it's your downtown business association or a combination of both? Did they get into that?
They actually apply for a lot of those grants on behalf of us if we go with their program, is what I understood.
My understanding, it's the city. It's
Okay.
yeah. So and it would be the cities.
Sure.
That would, yeah. And especially I'm 99% sure that on the Main Street America, and it's all tied together, it is the city. So Grow couldn't come in and do that, or it needs to be the city, and it's only because from a federal oversight. So and then the last one is we don't have, you know, like I said, currently we don't have a downtown business association. And so, you know, like I said, what's the appetite for that? I don't know, nor is, you know, the leadership there. And not that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that there's nothing in place right now that says, okay, these are the key individuals that are going to be leading the Downtown Business Association and coordinating the citywide leadership organizations and implementing the strategy. So those were my observations from that. So, or ours, excuse me. Go ahead, John.
And one of the big things that was the takeaway was the claim was a return on investment of 8 to 1. And that's a pretty good return on investment. So our businesses, Dwayne and I talked about it, our businesses that are downtown, there's hardly anything open after 4 or 5, you know, and so there'd have to be like a reinvention of the downtown identity. And I mean, it could happen, but we've got some work to do.
I think one of the questions that I've always had with this is, does Marshfield's town need revitalization? Or in many of the other cities I've been, as you drive downtown, it's full of empty buildings. I don't see that. I know we have some empty spots, but I maybe don't see the number that I have in other areas. So when you were asking about priority, I think maybe that's part of that fits in there. But it's definitely not something I want to sweep under the rug, because I don't want to become that community where half of the square is vacant buildings and we lose the historical landmarks that are our downtown. So thank you for providing this information. I really do appreciate it. Any questions or comments from the board?
And if I'm not mistaken, Dwayne, they will apply for a grant or help the business owners apply for grants for doing new storefronts and things like that as well outside of the city. Am I right?
Possibly.
I was thinking it was
Okay.
on all different levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's for a particular private business, yeah, it would make sense. The city wouldn't be the one for that, but,
So if they needed
but-
a fresh facade,
right.
something along
Yeah,
that lines, if
so-
they're doing historical preservation.
That's
Yeah,
a little
that-
different.
that is a
That's,
little different,
that's
But
a
it would have
little,
to be a
yeah,
building
so-
owner accepting.
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, as I said, whoever the private owner has to accept whatever those covenants are regarding that historical property. Yes. And so, yeah, I mean, as long as it's the private property independent, and if you're speaking as part of the overall revitalization program, there's going to be an agreement on the front end of what all these covenants are going to be. So yeah, they'll help come in and apply for a grant for a facade, but that facade needs to be in line with the rest of the strategy for downtown.
Okay.
One of the things that really made me think about is the old pictures of Marshfield downtown in the 50s when we had
Mhm.
a theater, we had commerce going on at all times, and it's kind of nostalgic, you know.
Definitely.
And we had a building that was built in 1880 on the square, and it's been through all kinds of stuff over the last 140 years. So kind of like you, we found that if we fixed it up, we had plenty of tenants wanting to rent it.
Okay.
And we had just sold that building, and I think they'll have it 100% occupied with 5 tenants where it used to be 2.
Okay.
So it does seem like there is more traffic, but like John says, it's dead at 5 o'clock. Everybody's rolling up the carpets.
It's more office space and, okay.
Yeah, we're not the only
Professional
community,
use.
as lawyers and bail bondsmen. on
Yeah,
our
lots of
downtown
those,
square.
lots of those.
And so, and yeah, they're businesses though, they're there, but like I said, they only
Okay.
operate, so.
No,
Okay.
I appreciate this. Thank you. All right, with that, we'll open up unfinished business. The first item on our agenda is the space needs analysis presentation. We have Joyce Buxton here with BKD, not the accounting firm. Sam, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, so at the last meeting, I kind of, I gave you guys a brief overview of kind of what Joyce had sent me and some of the questions that I had. Since that time, Joyce and I have got together and there's a little bit of a revision to what I had at the last meeting. I know I didn't give you guys a copy of it, but I did ask her to bring you guys a copy of everything tonight so you guys could have them in front of you and take them with you so you guys could take that and just review it. But with that, I think I'll turn it over to Joyce and she can walk you through kind of the process and what the findings were.
Just a little introduction. My name is Joyce Buxton and my partner Brian Kubik and I started this company. He's an architect. So our firm is an architecture, engineering and interior design company. But what my job is I kind of look at our projects exactly like I've done for you. This is where we would start, understanding what your needs are before we say you need to build this size building. So everything that we have to share with you today, it's going to look like it has an outline like a building, but it's not a building. It really is just what each of the departments need. And then my own experience telling me and listening to your team on what the potential growth they see, and then what the unmet needs are that you just don't have those spaces currently. And they are represented on blocks. It's a block diagram is what we call it. And they look like rooms, but they're really not. They're just spaces. And the other thing that it does for you is it kind of, as I listened to people, I tried to understand your work process and who needs to be close to whom to do the work. And so there is kind of a logic in how those blocks are laid out. So, and I don't know, Sam, are you able to pull up what I sent you?
I can if you want me to.
Sure.
I do think it's important for you guys to understand, because Joyce explained this to me too. So she's being very conscious of the space, right, to make sure that she gets that accurate. And so even for the staff that's not in here that I haven't talked to about this, Joyce, you can explain to them how it's not about the office size and how it's the bulky furniture that we have now, right? Not to get those charges, that it might free up more room if the furniture was different. Yeah, you can set them anywhere you want. You can set them over there, or
Sit down. Might just kind of walk you through. Well, I'm gonna need one for me. This looks like a building and it is not. So just not to be misled like this. This is an exercise that, as I said, we would do routinely. And it basically highlights for us on what size would be the ideal building, and do we have a little problem with, or do we have a big problem? And so this is just kind of how the space unfolded. It looks like there's a drive-through to the side, which seems like it works pretty well for you. So that's a feature that you might want to consider. We also took an inventory of the things that you currently have off-site in the police station and brought them into the building. And you're not going to hear any recommendations from me on if that makes sense or not. That may be absolutely the right thing to do, but maybe that doesn't need to be within this. So again, it really is just a layout of how the spaces departments interact internally among how your process happens, and then also how you interface with the public and how how individuals would come into a facility, not necessarily this facility, but any facility, and how the folks that would interact with the public, how they would be public focused, and there would be multiple points of entry. So not unlike how you have a different parks department entry, a different department entry for collections. So just kind of walking you through, like you have now, the collector's office would be adjacent to some kind of a drive-through access for convenience of residents. Probably we would do, if you were to do a building or modify this building, it probably would be a bit different than what you have, but some kind of a external connection there. Obviously that department needs some growth. Our thought is that potentially a municipal court clerk would have a presence. Then the idea that those folks probably should be located somewhere close to a vestibule, located somewhere close to a lobby, which you currently don't have, of course. I would say one of my observations is that I think that you're sorely lacking on what I would call undesignated space, where either people who are only interfacing with you on a part-time basis or come in occasionally, really nowhere for them to be. And so I think you could have some undesignated spaces. I also think you're pretty short on conference spaces. You have this, but this isn't really, two people could take up this whole space and then make it unavailable for others to use this space. So this is probably underutilized. And so again, that would be a decision for you guys to make. Is this the best use and best location for this function to happen? We've got some shared conference rooms, not in addition to this one, not that that would be open for multiple departments to use. And then just common features of restrooms, mechanical rooms, janitor's closets, circulation through the space. I thought this was kind of interesting. Your current square footage is, I calculated it with a 20% circulation, which is kind of typical, at 49.80. And that is about what this building is right now. So what we assess to be the case of what you are using and what this building actually has, those numbers are almost identical. So to Sam's point, even though a department might not have increased at all, I could see some inefficiencies in how some of your spaces were used. Obviously there's big bulky furniture in most of those spaces, and like everyone, we use what we have. But if you were outfitting them differently, if you had a clean slate of paper like I did, I would challenge that you may not need a lot more space. You may need to just utilize it more effectively. And then if we had the ideal where we would plan for growth and plan for more storage, that's in the yellow, just under the yellow section, the ideal square footage. If all of these city functions were in one building, it would be 9260 square feet. And that's shown within that dashed line. And that would be what you would require, I think. It doesn't include the drive-through, of course. And let's see, and this layout addresses the space needs and adjacencies only, and it's not intended to represent a specific building. There are also ways, I mean, as you can just visually see, the city storage currently in the police department, it's shown in that white block, and then the green storage adjacent to that. Those are just the traditional, shelving units, and that works, but it takes a tremendous amount of space to house records like that. And you might just, I kind of think of real estate as kind of A, B, and C priority, and probably that wouldn't have the same priority as a lobby. So you have to determine where that makes sense to allocate.
Along with that, do you think it's realistic that as we move towards electronically stored data, that while there's always going to be some need for permanent storage, the amount of storage that we need in the future is probably less than what we're using now?
Right. And yes, I think that's absolutely happening. People talked about it for years, and I've been doing this long enough that I'm actually seeing it happen. People really do have much less storage than we used to have. And so you don't want it to, I know that you have several facilities. You don't want to build for some, and maybe it's just a temporary location that you could access occasionally. Other questions for me?
Well, I appreciated you being willing to go back and update this information. One thing I had asked Sam, and I hope you don't mind me asking you as well, is this is quite a bit different than what we had when I inherited this position, but when the former board was sitting here. Can you kind of,
Why?
yeah,
Yes, sure.
I'm a little
Of
lost
course.
there.
No problem.
Okay.
I approached it as if there were no preconceived ideas.
Okay.
That we could be anywhere.
Right.
And I was involved in that earlier planning.
Right.
And at that time, it seemed as if the decision had already been made that you would go to a different location.
Okay.
And so once here's how big those walls are.
Right.
That's the space we've got. So even if it's not ideal, that department has to squeeze in right there.
Okay.
And so in that scenario, it was just the opposite of this scenario. The physical limitations drove the solution. Here, I'm giving you really what you probably need. And then how this is shuffled around, that's a big involved question, but I didn't assume that building, I didn't assume this building, I really didn't assume any building.
Right.
I just said blank slate, let's let the data be the data
Okay.
and tell us. And I also was super specific on what people needed. Most block diagrams don't have this level of detail on it, but I also recognize this is maybe not something you're going to pick up and run with next week. And so I wanted to, whoever picks this up, there's enough information here. 3 years from now, if I didn't do this and I was inherited this, as you said, I
Uh-huh.
would understand what to do
Okay,
for you.
that makes sense. On the building department, we had talked about like that individual needing more space for a big paper like this. Is that in this?
It is the kind of rust color at the top.
Okay,
And I kind of challenge that a little bit. And the way I think, the way I see work happening more is people have their designated spaces to work,
mhm,
and then they have designated spaces to meet with people.
okay,
And it's difficult for me, a space is expensive. And so I try to give you what you need, but not more than you need. And
Okay.
so what I've done is you might look at that block, those blue blocks in the middle, where there's some shared conferencing. So my understanding of the building department is that they meet with people certainly, but that's not something that happens all day, every day.
right,
And so my thought is he's adjacent to meeting spaces. He can take the big rolls of drawings out and set it on a clean table and then go back to the office where his work happens. But then he's in that space when he needs it. He can reserve that room. And there's all kinds of devices now that people can reserve conference rooms to maximize
right.
its usage. And then when he doesn't need it, it's freed up for somebody else to use. Maybe you, when you come in,
mhm,
you know, occasionally, or others, if there's an auditor, or if there's a, you know, your inspector who's offsite, I think.
The
Um,
planner.
Yeah,
Mhm.
planner,
planner.
when he's here. So just not, I wouldn't want to give a full-time space to someone who's here fairly rarely. That's a luxury.
So we talked about that in quite a bit of detail, and she's right, she challenged that. And so I would say that we even came to a place of agreeing to disagree maybe on a little bit of that, just because of how I see that functionality and how I see those plans rolled out for Rick. You know, obviously we don't have the shared space now, so I can't speak on that except for in here. And it's not uncommon for him to be in here doing a plan review. Right now, it's not too big of a deal because he's got the spare office, which will be filled at some point. But on a normal basis, when we're fully staffed, it's pretty common for me to have to kind of kick him out of here, have a meeting, him come back in here, and then kick him out again. And it is pretty interruptive for him, and sometimes it leaves nothing against Rick, but it does leave this room and not looking the best when you're meeting with people. So.
And the truth is, people are just messy. The process that most of us go through to do our jobs is messy, and we have files. And I just think it would present a nicer, more professional image to the public if you have kind of that. You don't watch how the sausage is made. You go to, you have
Mhm.
bring your stuff in, sit down. We can have a meeting without
Absolutely.
being interrupted with all the stuff around, and keep things that are really not for other people's eyes to see. Also, separate from a conference room. And as I said, many more conference spaces. I think that's a big deficiency of what you have, don't
Okay.
currently have.
And I think we talked about that council chambers would double as the courtroom.
Mhm.
Is that a huge savings? Do you see that as a great idea to merge those two together for space savings and just for flow
Well, I mean,
space?
this is a lot of real estate. And for it to just be, if you had other conference rooms and you weren't using this as a conference room, I mean, you meet twice a month,
Mhm.
2 nights, and in the night, in the evening. Yeah, I definitely, a definite cost savings.
Most cities that I've audited,
That's how they have it set up.
absolutely. Most municipal court is held on a folding table in the council chamber.
I will say every city I've prosecuted in, it's that. This is a unique situation.
And there's also additional costs of, you've got parking, you've got snow removal, you've got just all the stuff that it takes, anytime you can consolidate functions, your dollars ahead.
And while this is not part of this study, our police department needs room. Big time. So there's a Supreme Court ruling that requires us to separate to the greatest degree possible our police department from our municipal court function. Because they have all been down there, that we've done our best to construct walls and add doors and hire other employees, but in essence, just the fact that they're in the same building starts the question, right? So that's one reason to move it. Two, it is typical, but really, our police department needs space. Our guys all share two computers to do all reports. While they make great use of their space, and that's not part of this study, having that courtroom opened up just expands the possibilities for the resources that we could provide our officers, even to the extent that, they don't have a shower, they don't have a locker room, these typical things that departments should be provided, that our employees should be provided for. If they go into some place and they get sprayed with something, they don't have to go home and completely shower and change, come back on shift, right? We've provided, whether they want to use it or not, we have provided them an area where they could do that. So I do think moving the court has a legal purpose behind it. It's got a functionality in that it's a one-man show over there. You have one part-time employee that lives and breathes court and she's on an island. She has absolutely no one she can reach out to in that building to say, hey, cover me, because no one in the police department is allowed to touch it. So we kind of do her a disservice, in my opinion, by being over there. And moving that position here not only allows us some more efficiencies with our employees, where we can provide some cross training, it's probably going to increase employee morale in that particular area, and it affords our police department space.
Lots of wins.
And outside of moving some space for the court clerk coming over this way, this doesn't accommodate for future growth. So when we talk about that, of course, several of you knew, but part of what we're looking at long term, and part of what you've already approved this year, is that feasibility study for the new activity center. So all of the park space that you see in here, the idea would be, do we need to look at something bigger than the 9,700 square feet for future expansion? Well, at some point, the intention is for the Parks Department to be a part of that activity center and all their offices to be within that building. So therefore, you would have, I don't know what the percentage is, but you'd have some growth available within this footprint when that was built.
Absolutely, yeah. And that really is a very much a standalone function.
Right.
I mean, they're here because they're here, and
Right.
the space is here,
But that's about 600 square feet of this that we can grow into in the future without having to re-expand the footprint of any building.
correct.
Questions? Joyce, we really appreciate your
pleasure.
work here
My pleasure.
and your presentation. And we are definitely going to chew on this and
There's a lot.
probably talk about it
Mhm.
again at the next several meetings, right? But we really do appreciate having this level of information, of course, to get us started. Mine's gonna get me too long.
It was my pleasure to do that, and I'm so happy to see Marshfield doing such great things, and I was happy to see the 4th of July
Yes. It's always a great event. And I think after having the year we did in 2020, our community was incredibly proud to have it back. So that definitely came out. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Nope, you're free to go. Thank you very much.
All right, with that, we have the capacity study on the agenda next. Sam?
I told you that I was just gonna put that on there and leave it on there until it's ready. I'm just gonna ask the board to table that.
I'll move that to a future agenda item. Next up is the transportation plan update agreement budget calendar for 2022. Sam?
Just now read that, I think those kind of got to, maybe we got something there tied together. What
Okay.
this is for the transportation plan update agreement. That SimCog came and presented to you at the last meeting. And so in your packet is that Jason Ray sent over the agreement for that. And then along with that, right behind that is the ordinance that authorizes that. So if the board, staff recommends the approval of it, and I think that the board's consensus was to move forward with that. So if you want to do so, it's on there by ordinance tonight for you guys to approve.
And this is a fixed fee contract with 5,000 upfront and the remainder due at the end of production of all documents. And it includes the online
Yep.
interactive portion of this that will allow our citizens to really maneuver and reflect of where they are, what their normal routes are, and what changes might be coming their way. So any questions, concerns? All right, if not, I'll read the ordinance. Bill number 2021-22, an ordinance approving the mayor to sign a transportation plan update agreement between the city of Marshfield, Missouri and the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments. If you approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Second reading, bill number 2021-22, an ordinance approving the mayor to sign a transportation plan update agreement between the city of Marshfield, Missouri and the Southwest Missouri Council of Governments.
Move to approve. Second.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Okay. Moves us to papers thrown in driveway.
That's to me. All right. So at the last meeting, it was brought up about, I call it penny power. There's probably something different than that, but just the kind of, we'll call it junk mail that gets put in a little bag and thrown in the end of your drive. So I went and did some legal research, and there isn't anything out there in Missouri as far as any case law or statutes or anything like that. So I thought, well, I'll call some other city attorney friends of mine around the state. So I talked to various city attorneys, and I talked to some people I do a lot of stuff with at Missouri Municipal League. And the consensus on this is, one, really the city probably as a collective shouldn't be the driver on this, because it's likely a free speech issue, or if the city steps in and tries to eliminate that, then you potentially are opening yourself up to claims by the people wanting to throw that in there, as that you basically determined that my product is not worthy of going to the citizens of Marshfield, but yet you're not throwing a fit about the stuff that gets mailed out and put in somebody's mailbox that they throw away as junk. The recommendation by MML and some of the other cities that this has come up, long and short of it is, there's not a this is how you do it and how you make it stop. What the suggestion that was put out is that the city not do it, but the individual citizens, if a citizen has an issue with it, doesn't like it that they're getting these things in their driveway, that generally there is the company that is submitting these has some sort of contact information, either on the bag that stuff's filled out or is stuffed in, cover thing on whatever's being sent or whatever, and that the individual citizens, they will call these companies, and it might take several calls, but just basically it's almost like a no call list kind of thing, where you just repeatedly call and say, hey, stop throwing that in my driveway. other cities that I talked to, they say that usually works, at least for a short term. They have, at some point, the people sending these things out might determine, might forget that these people called and didn't want it. So every so often there might need to be a recall to the business by the citizen and say, hey, quit sending me that stuff. But outside of that, I mean, I guess one could bring what's called a nuisance lawsuit against the people throwing this in their driveway, that it's in essence a nuisance for it to be there. But I guess I would say the cost of bringing a nuisance lawsuit probably doesn't warrant when the person can just bend over and pick it up on their way back from the mailbox and throw it in the trash. Plus, you'd have a hard time. I think if you argued it in court, a judge would say, truly, what are every case has to have damages. And although it might be an annoyance, I don't know really what your damages would be. So I guess the long and short of it is I don't think there's anything the city can do, but the citizens should feel free to basically call and get mad at these companies or sending them out and just say, please quit putting them in my driveway, and almost treat it like you're trying to get on a no-call list. I mean, but there's nothing the state, it'd be nice if the state would set up something like that, like the attorney generals did for the no-call. If you could set up something to put a stop to it, but at this point, there isn't anything beyond that. Just it's an individual citizen thing to call and complain and try to get off the list.
Alderman Quinn, I think you'd asked for that item.
Mhm.
Is there any questions you might have, or any of our other aldermen, any questions, concerns? Okay, thank you very much for your research. That will bring us to Banning Court. Sam?
So it was brought up at the last meeting that for the consideration to pay Banning Court. Banning Court, for anybody that doesn't know, Banning Court is this little short dead end street just off of Banning, just up the hill from the new roundabout. And so I looked into that a little bit. What some of you may or may not know, there was a church that came in and bought this piece of property. When they did so, previous city administrator asked them, and they worked out to get additional right of way for this roadway in case it was ever needed for connectivity back here if there was a development back in this area. At the time and still today, I don't know that I would support that even as a road the way that it sits now, even with the appropriate right of way. Anybody that's familiar with that site knows that it sits right there almost on the crest of that hill, and it would not be a good entry or exit point to or from a subdivision because of how it sits on that hill. So as far as it being something for a connector street or even a local street or a collector street, I can only speak for myself, but I would not support that coming into a busy street like Banning Street the way that it is. But I went ahead and I looked at the price of, it was brought up about looking into see what the cost might be to just go ahead and pave that section that is there. I have no idea what the subgrade looks like underneath of that. I do know that it would take some grading work. I wouldn't recommend, if we were going to spend the money on the asphalt, I wouldn't recommend putting that down on what is there now. I would go ahead and do a full depth subgrade preparation. The alley or the Banning Court is only 15 feet wide, and from this point right here, it's about 330 feet long. The price of asphalt alone is going to be somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 to do, and then obviously you're going to have the base rock, the product alone. Product alone, you're going to have $15,000 to $18,000 or $19,000 in product alone, and then the manpower to prep it and get it ready. I personally, my opinion, I don't feel like that is in our best interest to do right now. I think the prices are very high on asphalt. I do, however, think that if the board wants to see some type of an improvement there, we have several ton of asphalt millings from wherever we've ground up separate other roads in town. I think that we could go over there and do some this winter, I think that this fall, I think we could go over there and do some prep work and put some millings in there. Those millings pack in there much tighter. I think we could also do a little bit of drainage work down here and improve the drainage at Banning, so maybe it won't wash the way that it does. This is not the only property in town or the only street in town that is not paved. Point out another one up here at Fairwinds Court, or Fairway Drive, I think is what this one is. I'm sorry. I gotta get my bearings here. So this short little section right here, it is the same way. Gotta get my bearings. So this right here is very similar. They've requested that to be paved in the past, and I for the same reason, it serves one house. I have worked with them to put more gravel on it. It still is MoDOT right away. At some point, this will become the city when we sign that jurisdictional transfer. MoDOT has worked with them. They weren't willing to pave or concrete the entrance, and so to me, it just doesn't make sense to spend that amount of money on a single drive going to a single residence. This one here probably does make a little bit more sense to look at long term. Again, it comes in here on a skew, so I don't know that I would, but it probably doesn't meet the same criteria as Banning Street, because if this develops, that could be a potential outlet. There's also an alley up behind Marshall Machinery and up behind Crittenden Street that is also not paved. The property owners up there, some of them really don't care. Some of them are totally opposed to that being paved just because of the nature of their business down through there, and they do drag equipment up and down through there, and they don't want to be responsible for any damages that happen to it. And so this section right here is also not paved, and this is in pretty bad repair as well. However, some of this is private. Some of this is private property. This is actually public property. Be happy to answer any questions, but we just talked about it as a future agenda item last time, so I don't know if that answers the questions, or if you want to go into more detail. I'll be happy to answer what I can.
Alderman Cunningham?
Well, until, say you're talking about that milling this fall, good idea, but until then, we gotta maintain it. And it's already washed out. So doesn't take much to wash it out.
Sure.
So, I mean, this is just a suggestion that Rob and I talked about while the equipment was here. That's the only thing we were talking about. Because you're a couple years down the road, you bring the equipment in just for that, it's gonna cost a lot more than it is now.
Yeah, they could charge.
That was just Rob and I talking about.
They
But
could
we
charge
have to
them.
maintain it. If it's ours, we have to maintain it.
And if it's, and I really think that the only place that it's washing is right there at the road. And
Pretty
so we could probably go in there and when we do that drainage work, and probably gonna have to put in a new culvert and this and that. We could probably pour concrete on the approach. So maybe cover what would be the right of way. And that would help a lot. And if we're gonna be in there with the millings, we can probably pitch that road a little bit to where it sheds over to the ditch.
That'll work for me.
Okay, so something we could put on a street department project list.
Yeah. Yep. If that's something the board wants to see happen, that type of issue there can be handled within current city budget. So it's just gonna be a matter of time. We have several projects, so it will be later this
You
fall.
were talking about that other piece of property up the road. Well, it washes up bad.
It does.
I mean, it's in the highway
It does.
when it rains.
Yeah.
So that's something needs to kind of looked at too.
Yeah,
I would think.
I
But
tried
That's
to get,
dangerous coming around the corner. You get that loose gravel.
I tried to get Mike to address that, but it's not
Yeah.
not an easy
Nothing
task.
now.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
that's something you look at later.
Any other questions or concerns on this
That's the thing, right?
item?
I know.
I don't believe a motion is necessary since it can go on the current project list and it does not affect budget. So we'll just leave it at that and enter new business. The first item on the new business is the final plat. However, with no motion on the variance, we are not able to do the plat. Is that correct?
Be correct.
Okay. So items number 1 and 2 on new business will be skipped. And we will go to number 3, which is financial disclosure ordinance. Karen, do you want to explain, or Monica, or whose wheelhouse?
Karen or myself, either one. Karen can kind of pick up on this off, but so basically this is something for elected officials, basically dealing with your disclosure for potential conflicts of interest. This is, I have to fill something out and send in every year. I think Monica, you do too, dealing with city finances. But this is an avenue, this is something that, and Karen can explain this way better than I can. This is an avenue, basically, that aldermen, that elected officials can opt out of doing that. And so by doing so, you have to do that. It used to be every year, but here recently, they've changed that to every other year. And so, but you do have to actually go in and approve that. It's on here for you guys' consideration, and there is an ordinance on here if you guys want to enact it.
The personal financial disclosure is required for all governmental units, and it's for anybody who has budgetary oversight authority or has the ability to expend large amounts of funds. So that's the reason, the city administrator is in there. That's the reason the board and the mayor have that authority. For example, at the university, I am responsible for overseeing this portion. It goes through the Missouri Ethics Commission. And we have well in excess of 400 people on campus that have to turn in a personal financial disclosure every year. For the rest of us, it's going to be about every other-ish year. It's a real simple form. When you get it, just try not to forget it because the fine will really bite. So I think they send out the forms in January, and it's got to be turned in by May.
And this has to be approved by, isn't there a date when this has to be approved by? Yeah.
So are there any questions on this particular item? If not, I will read the bill. Bill number 2021-24, an ordinance of the city of Marshfield, Missouri to establish a procedure to disclose potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Cunningham?
Aye.
Second reading. Bill number 2021-24, an ordinance of the city of Marshfield, Missouri to establish a procedure to disclose potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials.
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Kane?
Aye.
Boggs?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Cunningham?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item up is growth area budget review and the capital asset plan.
So Monica has done a very good job of putting together a spreadsheet. This is something that was talked about at the last meeting. So I'm going to break this into 2 parts. Tonight is just kind of for you guys to put it back in front of you for you to review. This isn't anything we had to create because you guys asked for this information. This is actually the spreadsheet that we use to track what we're doing. So everything on here, I'm probably not going to go line by line unless you just want me to. That'll be something that we do at a future meeting. I've kicked this back out to our department heads. We're just entering in. Monica's finishing up the 6-month financials. So that's kind of what we've been waiting for to trigger reviewing some of this stuff. And so at the next meeting or the first one in August, I'll probably be bringing this back to you with a plan and an explanation of what we're planning to spend still this year and what we're not going to spend or what we don't feel like we will. But you can see on the highlighted items, those are things that the board has already approved. And those have either been purchased or we're in the process of spending those funds. And then on the second page, those are expenditures that were not in the growth areas that the board has already approved as well. You will see, for instance, like the transportation plan from SEMCOG that you guys approved tonight. We went ahead and threw it on there because with the consensus being that you would approve it, wanted to give a clear representation of items on there that were not in the budget. Again, I do want to remind you guys, and you guys will get tired of seeing requests or needs, but this is not the overall needs for each department. Every year we ask our department heads to come up with a list of everything that they need from large to small. And then when we come down to actually approving the budget and putting something in front of you all for consideration, it goes through a whole nother prioritization. And so these growth areas are what really rose to the top and what we felt like we could accomplish and even appropriate funds for. Maybe not expend all at once, but bring back to you. We felt like the budget that it was within our cash balances to be able to do so.
So if I could on this, the first two lines, the new city hall building and the fiber ring, those are both associated to one project, which is continuing, ongoing. I will be asking for the next meeting to have a city hall discussion agenda item so that we can have a couple weeks to chew on what we've been presented and discuss more in depth of where we want to go from here. That particular project, as you can tell by the dollar figure, takes up a large amount of the growth areas. And so by making a decision before we move into budget, we'll really set the tone for what direction our staff need to be thinking we are moving. The next two items are both roof repairs on two currently owned assets. Both of the assets need the roof. There's no question about that. But our decision on the first decides whether or not we invest in the second, right? So those, again, have been held off until we make, so those top four lines right there are all hinging on the space needs analysis, which will then funnel additional conversation, and whatever direction the board makes or decision the board makes will give us the direction to build this next budget document. From there on, you're going to see various different things. And probably remember various different things. I've had conversations with almost all of the department heads today, kind of have a good idea of where they're headed with this. There is some of this stuff that's all but in motion right now. It just hasn't gotten to the point where it comes to us yet. There is some of this stuff that's just flat out not going to happen. But until we put it in the budget and we get through that process, we don't always know that. So that's the information that Sam and Monica will be able to present to us in August so that we know how much of this we're going to carry forward. But I really feel like the biggest chunk of this, there's two big chunks, right? The very, very top is a huge chunk of our growth areas, and it's all focused on we need to make a decision on City Hall. And the very bottom of this is all road projects that we have planned. Most of this utilizing the leftover funding that is available for transportation with the new interchange. I'll pick a word in a minute. Interchange and the Elm Street extension, fixing what we can of Marshall for that connectivity, and of course Banning, which is ongoing. And yes, I know the mayor does not remember that Banning is closed ever. So I'm right along with you when I hit the sign and have to turn into Orchard's parking lot. But making sure we complete those projects, that's the whole bottom section of that plan. So when you look at the middle, there's not really a lot left to discuss. The top is one decision. The bottom is going to happen. It's out for bid now. We'll talk about it real soon. It's just that middle that we need to focus on and decide whether it's still a priority to pull over into next year, or if we've decided something else and we're going to move forward in a different direction.
I'd be happy to answer anything or go through them line by line, but I will tell you, I mean, I'll have a lot more information once the department heads have a good chance to really dial in on what they feel like they're going to be able to do. And some of it I've challenged them to, some of it's contingent on being able to fill a staff position. So if we're not fully staffed, some of the priorities and some of the things that we need to do, some of those change and will present opportunities to do other things with those funds. So.
All right, any questions, comments? Thank you guys very much for including this, and thank you for blowing it up so that I could see it. I really appreciate that. Next item on the agenda is the budget calendar for 2022. Monica, you want to do this?
Well, we have begun our budget season. You all seen the invite go out, hopefully, for our first Finance Advisory Committee meeting. It's going to be a very informal meeting. It's just to introduce our new members. You are more than welcome to come. We'll also have it via Zoom. This is really just to get everybody back together, kind of go through the processes again, and then we do have a couple new members and try to introduce everybody.
Should be a very short meeting. But like Natalie had kind of thrown out early on in her term that she just wanted to make sure that you guys were invited to everything. And so we want to make sure that you guys are informed, and you're more than welcome to show up to any of these if you want to.
Actually, you're welcome to show up to the first one.
That's
But
true.
this particular
That is true.
committee operates best when we are not present.
Right.
And last year is a perfect example of that. There is no elected officials that serve on this committee. And by removing us from that process, that committee has the ability to review the budget and provide an more independent, right, expression of what they think of the budget we have put together. So I definitely invite you to go to the first meeting, but I do request that after that, we kind of give them their space unless it's requested.
So then we'll, I think Sam has set up a meeting to go over the goals and expectations for our 2022 budget with you so that we have clear direction both at the staff level and at the finance level as well. And
I think while we're on that, I mean, it's a budget, but it's a 22, it's the calendar. So I don't know if I saw the response. There was a conflict on the meeting for late in July that we were going to have.
Mhm.
So did the August 5th, did that work for everybody else?
I can do that.
Okay,
Um,
sorry, I didn't mean to
Nope,
interrupt you,
nope,
but
that's
if we
okay.
can lock that down, then
Will not work. for
not
me.
you. Okay, so I'll kick something out and we'll try again. Okay.
So then in September, there'll be another required meeting for the Finance Advisory Committee. And then this one will also be open to the board members. And this is when Natalie and I will sit down and kind of go over the government finances, how the government finances work. And this is especially important for any new members that have not been through this process before, understanding our funds and how our funding works, and what's allowed and what isn't allowed. And so we'll have a presentation for that. But the rest of it is department heads working on budget requests, and I'll be putting together the sheets to present to you at our meetings. And I believe we'll begin presenting those budget sheets in early October to the board as far as your debt funds, CIP funds, and enterprise funds. We'll start with those. The enterprise funds, with the rate study, we're just going to kind of play that one by ear and see where we are in that rate study. In September, looking at the Parks and Recreation Board and the Cemetery Board in October, getting together and working through their budget workshops as well. Any questions?
So those park and cemetery, since they are an actual board, their budget approval is a little bit different. Staff have put together a budget and it has gone to their respective boards and it has been chewed up and gone through and very detailed review has already occurred by the time it gets to us. So our responsibility for those two particular items are to make sure that it meets the statutory requirements, that everything's in there that we think should be, and that we agree with their prioritization. But outside of that, we have other boards of citizens that are really kind of diving into the weeds. So those two particular budgets sometimes don't require the level of scrutiny that we will give all the others. Okay, any questions on the 2022 budget calendar? All right, hearing none, that opens future agenda items. Just to let you know what is currently on the future agenda for 7/22. We will have a discussion about the leaf dump. We will begin some discussion on our fees. We will hopefully have the capacity study. We have a contract for mowing on blighted properties. Some discussion on that, possibly the contract or the proposal?
We bid that out. So it'll be you guys approving the bid. on
Okay.
that. Yep.
6-month financials should be ready by then. We have an easement that's been identified that we will need to consider vacating. So that will be coming up. And then I've asked, I kind of like 2 different agenda items on this. I'd like a review of city-owned properties and the city hall discussion. Future from that, in August, we will do our goal setting. We'll have Dwayne back with Casey to talk about the banner program. We are going to get into some economic development policy information in August, and we'll also get to set our property tax levies. Any other items you would like to add?
What's a review of properties? Will that just have like the scope of all the properties that the city?
Yeah, so it's that, only put into a list format where we can explain, this is what it is, and this is how we use it, and this is why we've got it.
Okay. That'll work for.
Anything else? All right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you very much.